What's up, guys? Back with another A Song of Ice and Fire review. Sorry for the terrible video quality. I'm recording in my brother's room, and I guess the lighting decided that it's going to be a Breaking Bad filter today. So, I don't know, welcome to Mexico. But, anyways, today we're going to be reviewing Bran 1. This is the first chapter in A Song of Ice and Fire. Last week we covered the prologue, so I'm excited to delve into it and see what happens. One thing I didn't know when I first read this is that winter has been coming since the first book. It's a small detail, but honestly it's interesting because I guess when I started reading this, I wasn't really paying attention because they literally said, hey, summer's ending, winter's coming, like snow's falling and all that. I don't know. It's not very important, but I guess it just shows how absent-minded I was in my first read. Another part of the chapter that surprised me was mentioning Mance Rayder. I don't know why. I mean, Mance was in the first book. He was in Jon, like, with the wildlings, and Jon getting sent to the wall. But it's interesting to see that George has been writing, like, setting up this, like, 3-book long character from the first chapter. It just, to me, it shows that he really had a plan for these first couple books. And it's really why, like, Classic King, Game of Thrones, Storm of Swords, while all of those are like probably the best of the series. It also sucks that, in this chapter we see Jared get executed. I don't know if it's Jared or Gerard or like Garrett, but I'll say Jared, it's cooler. Like, I get why he was executed, I get why Ned had to do it because of oath breaking and whatnot, but he was in the Watch for 40 plus years, and he only ran when the embodiment of death itself came for him. If I was in the Night's Watch, yeah, I would go fight the wildlings, maybe. Maybe if like I had like an army of like 1,000 people, I would go kill the others. But I'm not Azor Ahai, okay? I don't have Lightbringer, so I'm just a dude, and then these misty, pale skeletons start stabbing my friend, I'm running away. Like, I don't care. I was there because I was like poaching or something. So, I don't know, I feel like justice for him. But also, he was a little bit dumb, because he was still in his Night's Watch clothing, and Winterfell is pretty far away from the wall. I don't know if they're at if they were near Winterfell, or if they like went halfway. But the first thing I'm doing if I escape is I'm getting rid of my all black clothing. I mean, just find a random village. You have a sword. Just say, hey, give me some clothes, or I'll stab all of you to death. And if you have that bone in your body, you could just kill them all and then take their gold and clothes. Okay, but moving on from the Night's Watch, I didn't realize how young Ned was. I knew he was young, but he's only 35 years old. That is young. He has 6 kids. He has Robb, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon. 6 kids at 35. He was like 19 during Robert's Rebellion. It's insane. Like, I'm 16. My dad's 54. My dad is 20 years older than Ned. Like, now I really can understand why Ned has this rigid, strong sense of justice, because he's still a young guy. I mean, all he has experienced is Robert's Rebellion and then living with Jon Arryn and, like, getting that Valyrian honor. But it has been 16 years since Robert's Rebellion, but also he's kind of been doing nothing. He's just been sitting in Winterfell the entire time. So I guess it gives him time to really build upon that honor. He hasn't had to go through any experiences where his honor has been tested and like his justice has been, tried. Speaking of that, now a character that I also did not realize was in the first chapter was Theon. I knew Theon like existed, but I guess he just existed and then like he came back a lot later. So I was like, oh wait, yeah, Theon. But he's also a lot different than I thought he was. I guess his trauma in the last couple books really made me romanticize his character, but this guy's kind of a dick. I mean, he seems to take pleasure in like smaller life forms like rabbits suffering. I don't think it's exactly rabbits, but he seems to like be cruel and japey, and he really likes like being mean and make fun, and he likes needless violence. But I don't know, he's still my guy. Like, Theon is my Theon. Like, he's my dude. Because when you think about it, when you're being raised in Winterfell with this person that is seemingly a nice person, like the juxtaposition, I cannot pronounce that French word, El French, but the contrast between how Ned raised Theon as like his own son, as a ward, as probably how Jon Arryn raised him, Ned himself. But then we also have Theon knowing that he is essentially his father's sacrifice. If his father does something that Ned does not like, he will die. And I just feel like growing up like that, is going to damage your psyche. You're going to be a different man because you have that threat of death on your head. So maybe Theon treated death a little differently because of the way he was raised. Speaking of the three kids, Jon and Robb having a philosophical debate on horseback is just very funny to me. They're so young. They are 14 years old. When I was 14, I think I was still making stupid TikToks on my iPad. I was not watching a man get beheaded. But also, I feel like the way that they are described is a lot different than I thought they were. Robb is described as muscular and thick and stout, while Jon is slender and effeminate. I think he's got that straight dark hair, brooding. The typical emo. But their philosophical debate is essentially, was Jared brave when he died? Jon says no. He was afraid. You saw he was terrified. And Robb says, no, I think he took death, kind of by the chin. He saw that he was going to die, and he accepted that. It also leads into Bran, because Bran overheard this conversation, and he asked Ned, was he brave or was he not? And Ned says, a man can only be brave when he's afraid. So this sets up all four of their characters so well. We have Robb, and he believes in the bravery and nobility of facing death. Jon, I guess the way that he was raised, he thinks that he was more afraid, quite obviously. But then Ned comes in and with his more experience, and he says, no, he's both. He was afraid and brave, because when you are terrified is only when you can beat those fears and become brave. And it also leads to Bran's character development, as we see that he's being molded by Ned to kind of, because that's all that, that's why Bran's here. He's here to see what it means to lead. He's here to see what it means to be a ruler, which is kind of interesting because Bran is he's not the lowest on the rung. He's the second in line to inherit Winterfell, in case Robb got surprisingly maybe beheaded by the Freys or something, but we don't talk about that. So I can clearly see why Ned is trying to shape him, because even if Robb becomes Lord of Winterfell, Bran is still one of his banner lords. So I feel like all of that is just quite interesting. Now, speaking upon Ned's opinion on oath breaking, which is going back to a little bit or forward, I can't tell, don't remember. But he says that he had to kill Jared because he broke his oath, and oath breakers are the most dangerous because they've already forfeited their lives. But I disagree. Obviously, Ned has a very medieval style of justice. He thinks in black and white, I believe. You either have honor or you don't. But honor is a fluid, flexible, malleable thing. Honor changes the way the situation demands it to be. At least that is my opinion. I believe it is morally justified to break an oath if you realize that oath is not just. It's exactly like with Jaime Lannister. Because think about it. Ned, he calls Jaime Kingslayer the most. Besides maybe Bran. But Ned does not like Jaime. Even though Jaime did the honorable thing. What is more honorable? To sit beside, follow your oath, and watch all of King's Landing burn? Or to break your oath, kill the king, and save the entire population? So that's something that we can really look on in the later chapters, but I just feel like it's a good way to introduce Ned's sense of justice. And also I feel like if you read that line and you don't disagree, you are not looking at Ned's sense of justice as something to be inherently disagreed with. I don't think we're supposed to look at the way that Ned views the world and agree. I think we're supposed to see that this man is a little too rigid, a little too firm, and that he is inherently flawed in his worldview. Alright, now let's move on to the direwolves. This is less writing style, but more just, dang, these things are big. Bran says that the direwolf, the mother that died, was larger than his pony. For reference, a large pony, which I'm just going to assume that's what Bran has, is 14 hands tall, or about 58 inches. Now, that would mean that even if the direwolf was as large as a large pony, it would be 26 inches larger than a normal large wolf, which is about 36 inches tall. That is an insanely large beast. Imagine Robb with Greywind, I believe his wolf was called, going into battle, and he has this wolf the size of a horse. I would be terrified. I can see why people called him the White Wolf, or the Young Wolf, I can't remember. Like, people said that like he could shapeshift into a wolf. He was a demon. And of course he's a demon. He's got a wolf the size of like a deer. This thing could kill you in like one bite. I would be terrified. I'd run away. And here's the thing. Now let's move on from the size and more about the thematic concept. The direwolf was killed because a deer antler impaled it in the throat. Interesting enough, the Stark and Baratheon sigils are the direwolf and the stag. It is obviously foreshadowing the Clash of Kings, and I'm surprised I didn't realize this on my first read. But Joffrey is technically a Baratheon by most people, and he helped kill 2 Starks, and he tortured a 3rd. I feel like that could be what the direwolf and the stag represent, but I think it represents something different. I think it represents the strained relationship between Ned and Robert, or Renly's betrayal of Ned at the end of the book. Think about it. Ned and Robert were best friends. They were raised together. They were practically brothers. But they haven't seen each other for 16 years. And Ned has not changed that much in between. And Robert, maybe he stayed too much of the same while changing. Before, he was a young man. He was, bold and brave. He was young, so his fires and flames were good. Like it was a sign of a man that wanted to seize the world, grasp it by the reins. But now he's a fat slob of a king who is holding on to his former glory. He still thinks he can take his warhammer and heave it and swing it at anyone that crosses his way. But he's feasted too many times, drank too many wine. So now he's just this 16-year-old in the body of a fat old man. So I feel like the relationship being strained is because Robert didn't take the form of a good king. Ned becomes the hand, and he essentially sees that Robert sucks at ruling. He is trash. They clash heads, especially when it comes to the Targaryens, when Ned said, hey, how about we don't execute 2 children when we killed their entire family? Maybe we shouldn't do that. So I feel like George could be writing the direwolf and the stag as a representative of that, but it could also be Renly's betrayal. More on that now. Renly told Ned, hey, I have these gold cloaks. I will give them to you. Let go. Tell Cersei, hey, Joffrey's an illegitimate son. We're taking the throne. We need to give it to someone else. And Ned's like, all right, I got that. Let's do this. Now, this is just on my recollection, but I believe he goes up and he says, Cersei, I have this signed thing that says that, I have power now, and Joffrey's illegitimate, so you need to step down, and Stannis will become king. And Cersei essentially just says, nah, gold cloaks, take him. And then he's like, wait, what? No, I had the gold cloaks. Renly, I had the gold cloaks. You agree with me. And Renly's kind of like, I want to be king, so screw you. So I feel like that could be what the direwolf and stag represent, but it could be a mixture of the 3. It could be something completely different. Let me know in the comments what you think. I love to see your guys' opinions, especially the older people that have been reading this for like 15 years. But speaking of animals, they mentioned that direwolves have not been seen in the south of the wall in over a century. I feel like the reason why the wolves most likely fled is because of the others. Exactly the same reason why the free folk are leaving. Not really that important, but I find it interesting because it's really George setting up the themes that the free folk aren't going down south because they just want to rape and pillage everyone. It's because they don't want to die, okay? That wall is not the liberation that the Westerosi of the Seven Kingdoms see. So the free folk, it is death, okay? There's no way to cross besides taking the wall by storm, going to Eastwatch by the sea, or the other one. I guess there's a bridge, but also the Night's Watch would just, probably destroy the bridge. So Mance Rayder, as Jon Snow sees him, is this king beyond the wall who wants to kill everyone and destroy everything. But as the reader, we should really see that Mance Rayder is a guy who doesn't want to die. And I think we can all emphasize with not wanting to be killed by the embodiment of death. Now the last thing, a bit sillier, but Jon is aura farming. He always has been aura farming. He always will. When he sees the white direwolf and Theon says that it will die faster than the other ones, Jon says, "I think not. This one is mine." Not really aura farming, but also it's aura farming in the highest caliber, in my opinion. I think George has written him to be the emo king. This guy is the epitome of the broody young teen. The fact that he's like, "Father, you have 5 trueborn kids and 5 dire wolves," and then he sees the white one and is like, "Yeah, this one's mine because I'm not a Stark. I'm a Snow." I don't know, just, George is really writing this guy to the extreme. But that's everything for my reread. I think that this chapter does a great job of showing us Jon and Rob's contrasting morals, Ned's philosophy on oaths, and Theon just overall being a dick. But I also like Bran in this chapter. This is probably one of the better Bran chapters. Who knows, maybe I'll love them in the reread. But stick around for next week's videos, guys. Hopefully I can get it to you shorter than now. I think doing the math, at the rate I'm going, I will be finished by book 1 in like 5 years. But let's hope not.